Germany. But hidden beneath the rubble of war lies one of the darkest and most silenced tragedies of the 20th century. Between January and August 1945, as the Red Army advanced into the heart of Germany, the largest incident of mass rape in recorded history took place. Historians estimate that nearly 2 million German women were assaulted during those months. In Berlin alone, during just April and May, more than 100,000 cases were recorded in hospital reports. In East Prussia, Pomerania, and Silesia, the numbers rose even higher, over 1.4 million victims. Many of these women were not attacked once, but dozens of times, some as many as 70 times in just a matter of weeks. The aftermath was catastrophic. More than 200,000 women and girls are believed to have died, not only from violence itself, but from the spread of venereal diseases and the trauma that followed. This is the story of those events, a story that was silenced for decades, a story that reveals the darkest side of war, and a story that we must remember. Part 1. The Road to 1945. To understand how such a tragedy could happen, we must first look at the war itself. By 1945, Nazi Germany was collapsing. The Red Army had fought its way west, liberating lands that had suffered unimaginable atrocities under German occupation. Entire Soviet villages had been burned to the ground. Millions of civilians were starved, executed, or deported as forced labor. Over 20 million Soviet citizens were killed during the war. Soviet propaganda painted Germans as monsters. Soldiers were told that they were marching into enemy territory where revenge was justified. As the Red Army crossed into German lands, that propaganda turned into brutal action. Part 2. The Wave of Violence. The first major wave of sexual violence began in January 1945, when Soviet troops entered East Prussia. Villages and towns were consumed by chaos. Reports reveal horrifying numbers. In East Prussia, Pomerania, and Silesia, more than 1.4 million rapes were committed. In Berlin, between April and May alone, over 100,000 rapes were recorded by hospitals. No one was spared. Victims included young girls, elderly women, nuns, and even pregnant mothers. Survivors recalled women being dragged from hiding places, raped in front of their families, and in some cases assaulted repeatedly by dozens of soldiers in one night. Eyewitnesses describe victims being raped up to 70 times during this period. For many, it was not just one attack, but a cycle of repeated humiliation and violence. Part 3. The Human Cost. The aftermath of this violence was catastrophic. More than 200,000 women and girls died, not only from the brutality of the assaults, but from untreated injuries, infections, and the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. Hospitals in Berlin were overwhelmed. Doctors recorded a flood of cases involving both physical trauma and pregnancies. Abortions, though illegal, were permitted in secret, as thousands of women carried children conceived through violence. For survivors, the suffering did not end when the war ended. Many lived with permanent injuries, infertility, or lifelong shame. Others chose silence, never telling their families what they had endured. Part 4. Why did it happen? Historians have long debated why the Soviet Red Army engaged in such widespread sexual violence. Several factors stand out. Revenge. After years of Nazi atrocities on Soviet soil, many soldiers saw German women as the ultimate form of retribution. Dehumanization, propaganda taught soldiers that Germans were not individuals but enemies, making violence easier to justify. Lack of discipline. Although Stalin officially forbade rape and looting, commanders often ignored the crimes, allowing soldiers to act without fear of punishment. Chaos of war. With law and order broken down, civilians were vulnerable to the unchecked power of occupying forces. It is important to acknowledge that not every Soviet soldier participated. Some tried to protect civilians, but the sheer scale of the violence shows a widespread failure of command. Part 5. Survivor Voices. The statistics are staggering, but it is the voices of survivors that reveal the true horror. One Berlin woman recalled, "They came in groups. When one was finished, another took his place. I do not remember how many there were. I lost count." Another survivor from East Prussia said, "We prayed for death. We were no longer human. We were nothing but bodies for their pleasure." Such testimonies, written in diaries and later interviews, remind us that behind the numbers were real human beings, each carrying a lifetime of trauma. Part 6. Silence and Denial. For decades, this tragedy was hidden. The Soviet Union denied or dismissed reports of mass rape, framing them as Western propaganda. In East Germany, speaking about it was dangerous, since the Red Army was seen as a liberator, not an oppressor. In West Germany, survivors were often silenced by shame. With society focused on rebuilding and confronting Nazi crimes, there was little space to discuss what German women had endured. Only in recent decades, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, did historians begin openly documenting these events. Works such as Walter Zapotoczny Jr.'s Beyond Duty and countless survivor accounts have finally brought this hidden history to light. Part 7. The Legacy. The legacy of 1945 is one of silence, trauma, and difficult memory. For the women who lived through it, the pain often lasted a lifetime. For their children and grandchildren, the silence created unanswered questions and invisible scars. Today, historians acknowledge this as one of the largest incidents of mass sexual violence in human history. It does not diminish or excuse the crimes of Nazi Germany, but it reminds us that war unleashes horrors on all sides. The lesson is clear. When hatred and vengeance guide armies, civilians, especially women, become the battlefield. Conclusion. In just 8 months of 1945, millions of German women endured suffering beyond imagination. Their bodies became the front line of vengeance, their silence the price of history. For decades, their stories were hidden. But remembering them today is an act of justice. Their suffering was real. Their voices matter. And their memory should never be erased. Because only by facing the darkest parts of our past can we hope to prevent them from repeating in the future.